Imagine being in a life or death situation, where every decision you make could mean the difference between survival and catastrophe. For soldiers in the midst of war, this is a reality they face every day. But what drives human behavior in war? Is it loyalty, duty, or something more primal? The answer lies in a fundamental aspect of human psychology: fear. Did you know that the fear of death is the primary driver of human behavior in war? And it can be triggered by even the slightest hint of danger. This fear is not just a natural response to danger, but a carefully crafted psychological tool used by military leaders to control and manipulate soldiers. By exploiting this primal fear, military leaders can motivate soldiers to take risks, push beyond their limits, and even sacrifice themselves for the greater good. But the consequences of this fear-driven behavior can be devastating. Soldiers who experience traumatic events during war are at a higher risk of developing post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, and anxiety disorders. These conditions can have a lasting impact on their mental health, relationships, and overall well-being. In fact, studies have shown that up to 30 of soldiers who serve in combat zones will experience PTSD symptoms, with many experiencing debilitating symptoms that can last for years or even a lifetime. The psychological effects of war on civilians are often overlooked, but they can be just as profound. Civilians living in war zones often experience fear, anxiety, and trauma, which can lead to a range of mental health problems, including depression, anxiety disorders, and even suicidal thoughts. In addition, the constant stress and uncertainty of living in a war zone can take a toll on civilians' physical health, making them more susceptible to illnesses and injuries. One of the most striking examples of the impact of fear on civilians is the psychological phenomenon known as rape trauma syndrome. During the Bosnian War, thousands of women and girls were subjected to mass rape and other forms of trauma. The aftermath of these events was nothing short of devastating, with many survivors experiencing PTSD, depression, and anxiety disorders. In some cases, the trauma was so severe that it led to a complete breakdown in the survivors' mental health, making it difficult for them to function in their daily lives. In war, fear is not just a natural response to danger, but a complex and multifaceted phenomenon that can be triggered by a range of factors, including the threat of death, the loss of loved ones, and the breakdown of social norms. By understanding the role of fear in war, we can begin to appreciate the psychological toll that conflict takes on both soldiers and civilians. But what can be done to mitigate the impact of fear on soldiers and civilians during war? One approach is to provide psychological support and counseling to those who need it. In recent years, the military has implemented a range of programs aimed at reducing the stigma associated with mental health issues and providing soldiers with the support they need to cope with the stresses of war. In addition, there is growing recognition of the need to address the psychological impact of war on civilians. Humanitarian organizations and governments are working together to provide psychological support and counseling to civilians affected by conflict. By acknowledging the psychological toll of war and providing support to those who need it, we can begin to rebuild lives and communities devastated by conflict. As we explore the complex and often disturbing world of fear psychology in war, it's essential to acknowledge the human cost of conflict. The stories of soldiers and civilians who have experienced the trauma of war are a powerful reminder of the devastating impact of fear on human behavior. By understanding and addressing this fear, we can begin to create a more compassionate and supportive environment for those affected by war. In our next section, we'll examine the role of technology in war and how it's changing the nature of conflict. We'll explore the impact of drones, social media, and other technologies on the battlefield and their effects on soldiers and civilians. Join us as we continue to explore the complex and often disturbing world of fear psychology in war. Can you imagine being in a situation where you're forced to make a split-second decision that could mean the difference between life and death? For soldiers in the midst of war, this is a reality they face every day. But what drives human behavior in war? Is it loyalty, duty, or something more primal? The answer lies in a fundamental aspect of human psychology: fear. Have you ever wondered how governments and military leaders use propaganda to shape public opinion and justify war? It's a question that has puzzled historians and psychologists for centuries, and one that has a profound impact on our understanding of human behavior in the face of conflict. As we delve into the psychology of propaganda, we'll explore how it's used to create fear and uncertainty, often by manipulating public perception of the enemy. But what drives this manipulation, and how does it affect the way we think about war? One of the most striking examples of propaganda in action is the way that governments and military leaders present information to the public. They use emotive language and imagery to create a sense of urgency and fear, often by painting a picture of a catastrophic threat that needs to be addressed. This can be seen in the way that politicians and military leaders use terms like existential threat or imminent danger to describe the enemy. But what's behind this language? Why do governments and military leaders use it to shape public opinion? The answer lies in the psychology of fear. When we're faced with a perceived threat, our brains go into overdrive, releasing stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. It's a natural response, but one that can be manipulated by clever language and imagery. Take, for example, the use of propaganda during World War II. The Nazis used propaganda to create a sense of fear and uncertainty, often by depicting Jews and other minority groups as a threat to German society. The result was a wave of anti-Semitic violence and persecution that would have far-reaching consequences. But propaganda isn't just used to create fear, it's also used to create a sense of purpose and unity. Governments and military leaders use it to rally public support for war and military action, often by framing it as a necessary evil to protect national security or way of life. This can be seen in the way that politicians and military leaders use terms like national interest or strategic imperative to justify military action. The impact of propaganda on public opinion can be significant, often leading to increased support for war and military action. But it's not just a matter of persuasion, it's also a matter of manipulation. Propaganda can be used to create a sense of false consensus, where people believe that the majority of the public supports a particular policy or action, even if it's not the case. So how can we spot propaganda in action? One way is to look for emotive language and imagery, often used to create a sense of urgency and fear. Another way is to look for inconsistencies in the narrative, often used to create a sense of confusion and uncertainty. And finally, we can look for the use of loaded terms, often used to frame a particular issue or policy in a way that's favorable to the government or military. As we continue our exploration of the psychology of propaganda, we'll examine the role of social media in shaping public opinion. We'll look at how governments and military leaders use social media to spread propaganda and shape public opinion, often using fake news and bots to create a sense of false consensus. But before we move on, let's take a step back and consider the implications of propaganda on our understanding of human behavior in the face of conflict. When we're faced with a perceived threat, our brains go into overdrive, releasing stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. It's a natural response, but one that can be manipulated by clever language and imagery. So what can we do to resist the power of propaganda? One way is to be aware of the language and imagery used by governments and military leaders, often used to create a sense of fear and uncertainty. Another way is to seek out multiple sources of information, often used to create a more nuanced understanding of the issue. And finally, we can engage in critical thinking, often used to challenge the narrative and create a more informed opinion. As we move forward, we'll explore the role of propaganda in shaping public opinion and how it affects the way we think about war. We'll examine the impact of propaganda on our understanding of human behavior and how it can be used to create a sense of fear and uncertainty. And we'll look at the ways in which we can resist the power of propaganda, often by being aware of the language and imagery used by governments and military leaders. But for now, let's leave you with a question. What's the difference between propaganda and information? Is it possible to tell the two apart, or are they often used interchangeably? We'll explore this question in more depth in our next section. But for now, let's just say that the line between propaganda and information is often blurred and requires a critical eye to distinguish between the two. As we continue our journey into the psychology of fear, we'll examine the role of propaganda in shaping public opinion and how it affects the way we think about war. But before we move on, let's take a moment to reflect on what we've learned so far. We've explored the psychology of fear and how it's used to manipulate public opinion. We've examined the role of propaganda in creating a sense of fear and uncertainty, and how it can be used to justify war and military action. And we've looked at the ways in which we can resist the power of propaganda, often by being aware of the language and imagery used by governments and military leaders. But there's still so much to explore, and we're just getting started. In our next section, we'll delve into the role of social media in shaping public opinion and how it's used to spread propaganda and shape public opinion. We'll examine the impact of social media on our understanding of human behavior and how it can be used to create a sense of fear and uncertainty. So stay tuned, and let's continue our journey into the psychology of fear. Imagine being on the battlefield, surrounded by the chaos of war, where every decision you make could determine the course of your life or the lives of those around you. It's a scenario that's been played out countless times throughout history. And yet, despite the countless battles fought and won, the underlying drivers of human behavior in war remain a mystery. But what if I told you that fear is a key factor in military strategy, and it can influence the way we fight and win wars? In fact, top military leaders have long recognized the power of fear in shaping the outcome of conflicts, and it's a strategy that's been used throughout history to gain an advantage over the enemy. One of the most striking examples of fear-based military strategy can be seen in the tactics used by the ancient Greeks during the Peloponnesian War. The Greek general, Epaminondas, was known for his innovative use of psychological warfare, using fear to demoralize the enemy and gain an upper hand on the battlefield. By exploiting the weaknesses of his opponents, Epaminondas was able to create a sense of fear and uncertainty that ultimately led to his victory. This use of fear as a military strategy is not new, and it's a tactic that's been employed by military leaders throughout history. From the use of psychological operations to spread disinformation and propaganda, to the deployment of special forces to spread fear and intimidation, the impact of fear on military strategy can be significant. But what's perhaps most striking is the way in which fear can influence the way we fight and win wars, often leading to increased casualties and a longer duration of conflict. Take, for example, the use of fear in the Gulf War. The Iraqis, under the leadership of Saddam Hussein, used fear tactics to try and demoralize the coalition forces. They launched a series of missile attacks on major cities, hoping to create a sense of chaos and confusion. But the coalition forces, led by General Norman Schwarzkopf, were well prepared for this tactic. They used advanced technology and intelligence gathering to pinpoint the locations of the Iraqi missile launchers and launched a series of precision strikes that destroyed the launchers and ended the threat. But the use of fear as a military strategy is not limited to the battlefield. It's also used in the propaganda wars that often accompany conflicts. Governments and military leaders use fear to shape public opinion and justify their actions, often using emotive language and imagery to create a sense of urgency and fear. And it's a tactic that's not limited to military conflicts either. Fear is used in politics, in business, and in every area of life where there's a need to influence human behavior. So how does fear shape the way we fight and win wars? The answer lies in the way in which fear influences human behavior. When we're faced with a threat, our bodies release a cocktail of hormones and neurotransmitters that prepare us for fight or flight. Our hearts beat faster, our senses become more acute, and our decision-making becomes more impulsive. It's a response that's designed to help us survive in the face of danger, but it's also a response that can lead to mistakes and miscalculations on the battlefield. In fact, studies have shown that when soldiers are exposed to high levels of fear, they're more likely to make mistakes and engage in impulsive behavior. This can lead to increased casualties and a longer duration of conflict. So how can military leaders use this knowledge to their advantage? By understanding the psychological and emotional impact of fear on soldiers, they can develop strategies that minimize the risks associated with fear-based decision-making. One approach is to use training and simulation exercises to prepare soldiers for the psychological and emotional demands of war. This can include scenario-based training, where soldiers are placed in simulated environments that mimic the stresses and uncertainties of real combat. By rehearsing different scenarios and outcomes, soldiers can develop the skills and confidence they need to make informed decisions in high-pressure situations. Another approach is to use psychological support services to help soldiers manage their fear and anxiety. This can include counseling, therapy, and other forms of support that help soldiers cope with the emotional demands of war. By providing soldiers with the tools they need to manage their fear, military leaders can reduce the risks associated with fear-based decision-making and increase the chances of success on the battlefield. In conclusion, fear is a key factor in military strategy, and it can influence the way we fight and win wars. By understanding the psychological and emotional impact of fear on soldiers, military leaders can develop strategies that minimize the risks associated with fear-based decision-making. From the use of psychological operations to the deployment of special forces, the impact of fear on military strategy can be significant. So the next time you hear about a war or a conflict, remember that fear is often a key factor in the outcome. Meet Ryan Thompson, a former U.S. Marine who served 3 tours in Iraq. His story is one that will haunt you long after you've finished watching this documentary. It's a story of the devastating effects of fear in war and the long-lasting impact it can have on soldiers and civilians alike. Ryan Thompson's journey began like many others, with a sense of patriotism and duty. He enlisted in the Marines at 19, eager to serve his country and make a difference. But what he experienced on the battlefield was far from what he had imagined. The constant barrage of gunfire, the screams of the wounded, and the feeling of being completely outnumbered and outgunned. It was a nightmare that would stay with him for the rest of his life. The use of fear as a military strategy is a tactic that's been employed by armies throughout history. But what's often overlooked is the human cost of this approach. The constant bombardment of fear can lead to conditions such as PTSD, anxiety disorders, and even suicidal tendencies. Ryan Thompson's story is a stark reminder of the toll that this takes on soldiers. I remember one day we were on patrol, and we came across a group of civilians, Ryan recalls. They were just standing there, frozen in fear, with their hands up. It was like they were paralyzed with fear. And I remember thinking, what's happening here? It was like they were trapped in this moment, and they couldn't escape. The impact of fear on civilians can be just as devastating. The constant displacement and humanitarian crises that result from war can have a lasting impact on communities. Ryan Thompson saw this firsthand in Iraq, where entire neighborhoods were reduced to rubble and families were left without food, water, or shelter. It was like a never-ending nightmare, Ryan says. I saw things that I'll never be able to unsee. I saw families torn apart, children orphaned, and entire communities destroyed. It was like the entire world had gone mad. As we delve deeper into the psychology of fear in war, it becomes clear that the use of fear as a military strategy is not just a tool of war, but a destroyer of lives. It's a reminder that the true cost of war is not just measured in dollars and cents, but in the human cost of fear, trauma, and suffering. The story of Ryan Thompson is a testament to the enduring power of fear in war. It's a reminder that the impact of fear can be felt long after the fighting is over, and that the scars of war can be just as deadly as any bullet or bomb. As we move forward in this documentary, we'll explore the ways in which fear is used as a military strategy and the impact it has on soldiers and civilians alike. We'll examine the psychological effects of fear on the human mind and explore the long-lasting consequences of trauma and suffering. But for now, let's take a moment to reflect on the human cost of fear in war and the stories of those who have been forever changed by its devastating power. As we stand at the threshold of a new era in warfare, a question echoes through the corridors of history. What can we learn from the past about the role of fear in war? The answer lies in the trenches of World War I, where soldiers on both sides were driven to madness by the constant barrage of artillery fire. The screams of the wounded, the stench of decay, and the endless uncertainty created an environment where fear became the enemy within. But was it just a product of circumstance, or was it something more sinister? Historians have long acknowledged that fear has been a cornerstone of military strategy throughout the ages. From the ancient Greeks to modern-day special forces, fear has been used as a tool to break the enemy's will, to create chaos, and to gain an upper hand. The infamous scorched earth policy employed by the Mongols, the brutal suppression of rebellions in colonial Africa, and the calculated use of terror tactics in modern asymmetric warfare all share a common thread: the manipulation of fear to achieve strategic objectives. But what are the consequences of this approach? The impact of fear on military strategy can be catastrophic, leading to increased casualties, prolonged conflicts, and a devastating toll on soldiers and civilians alike. The human cost of fear in war is staggering, with PTSD, anxiety disorders, and depression becoming increasingly prevalent among veterans. And yet, despite the evidence, fear remains a powerful and often overlooked variable in modern warfare. As we look to the future, it's imperative that we learn from the past. By examining the role of fear in war, we can gain a deeper understanding of its complexities and develop more effective strategies for mitigating its effects. This is not just a matter of saving lives, but also of preventing the long-term psychological scars that can haunt soldiers and civilians for decades to come. The psychology of fear in war is a complex and multifaceted issue, but by understanding its role and impact, we can work towards a more peaceful and secure future. Join the conversation by sharing your thoughts and experiences with fear in war in the comments below. And if you'd like to learn more about the psychology of fear in war, be sure to subscribe to our channel for more in-depth content and expert insights.